Good evening, delegates. Honorable Minister Rosalinda Tuya, PS of Environment, CEO of the Africa Climate Week, the Chair of SUBSTA, Harry Vrels, all our partners, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Every good and successful event within the African culture calls for a relatively as well good closing ceremony. I'm really glad that we've come to the close of a very, very successful week. It was indeed a great pleasure for us to combine the Africa Climate Summit and the Regional Climate Week for Africa, basically to ensure that we fuse not only the political dimension of addressing climate change within the Africa continent, but infuse the technical aspects that are required to transform climate action into policy and into implementation. It is now indeed my great honor. And as we said, and I really want to echo what Richard Munang has just said, I love listening to his sayings, a single bracelet does not jingle. And I think there's been a full demonstration of that African saying in the last few days in this hall right here. As we move to the closing ceremony of this event, and I will be bringing a statement also from His Excellency Simon Steele, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, I would like to turn to the Kenya government and say that as UNFCCC, we were greatly honored for this partnership. We were greatly honored that you saw it rightful to invite us and to offer to host the Regional Climate Week within the soil of Africa. As Alejandro has said, this Regional Climate Week is actually the first in a series of 4 that we will be having as we move closer to COP28. The energy, the success that has resounded here on the African soil is expected to vibrate starting in a couple of weeks in the Middle East and North Africa region, moving on to the Latin America region in Panama, and closing the 4th Regional Climate Week that will be held in Malaysia. We hope that you have set a high bar, which I think indeed you have, and that the other regional climate weeks are actually watching you and will aim to accelerate that effort and that energy as we draw towards COP28. Allow me now, with great honor, to invite our minister, and we are really excited that you can honor us and come to this closing ceremony, to come and make the closing remarks and highlight the role of Kenya in the summit and the week, and the road to COP28. I would like to welcome you, Honorable Minister Rosalinda Soipan Tuya, to the podium to speak to the delegates.
Thank you very much, my sister Cecilia. Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, His Excellency Simon Steele, Cecilia Njenga, Director, Intergovernmental Process and Collective Progress, UNFCCC, Nicholas Svengingsen, Manager, Africa Climate Week, Harry Vrels, the Chair of SUBSTA, PS Environment and Climate Change, Kenya, Engineer Festus Ngeno, the CEO of the Africa Climate Summit, Joseph Nganga, heads and members of civil society organizations present here, colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The nostalgia for the first week is beginning to creep in. When I stood here on Monday to usher in the beginning of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week, I did not know what to expect. and I know many of us did not know. The anxiety was indeed palpable. But now, as we host this last plenary, how I wish we were starting all over again. Of course, the anxiety came with the fact that we were doing the first ever Africa Climate Summit, as well as twinning to also host the Africa Climate Week. I already missed the science, diplomacy, and development conversations of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week as we come to a close. Allow me to thank the UNFCCC Secretariat for accepting Kenya's request to host, as the host country for this year's Africa Climate Week. Allow me also to thank the African Union for allowing Kenya and African Union Commission to co-host the Africa Climate Summit, and for all those who made the events possible to run in parallel with each other. I hope we have been good hosts to both the Africa Climate Week participants and the Africa Climate Summit. Have we? Our sincere appreciation to all the partners that made the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week possible. The list of donors, philanthropies, and individuals is very long, and you all know who you are. Some of you are in this room. On behalf of the government and the people of Kenya, the African Union, the UN framework, and the UNFCCC fraternity, allow me to say thank you very much. Asanteni sana. Allow me also to, in a special way, thank the President of Kenya, His Excellency President Dr. William Ruto, for his leadership, guidance, and support as we prepared for this week. It has been many months of toil, diplomacy, research, planning, but as always, the President of Kenya, the leadership of the African Union, and the African Commission were there at hand to guide and assist. Allow me to, in a special way, to thank my colleagues in the Cabinet of Kenya for going out of their way and supporting various aspects of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week to make the events of the past week possible. The Kenya Defense Forces deserve a special mention. They turned over this venue, the KICC, in the shortest time possible with such military precision. I will also not forget to mention Excellency colleague ministers from Africa and beyond who showed up in large numbers to participate and support this initiative taken up by Kenya. My sister, Ambassador Josepha Sako, has always been there to co-chair right from our CAHOSC meeting in February 2023 to plan for this event. Our appreciation to the entire Secretariat of the African Union, the Secretariat of the Africa Climate Summit, and the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, local and international media, individuals and groups. You were all outstanding. Again, asanteni sana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed an extraordinary week of participation, listening, exchanges, cooperation, and certainly essential progress in our common action against the vagaries of climate change. The Africa Climate Summit realized many outcomes, including the adoption of the African Leaders' Nairobi Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action. Also, a pathway to a new global financial deal that includes at-scale and fit-for-purpose financing instruments and products, including also investment commitments, showcasing multi-billion-dollar worth of green investment deals in the continent across all sectors, including energy, nature, and water. Announcements on tangible progress on ongoing major continent-wide and global initiatives, as well as a clear roadmap between the summit and COP28. The Africa Climate Summit and the African Climate Week brought together about 30,000 participants, representing over 130 countries and over 400 side events, all encouraging greater climate ambition in all sectors of our society. The Africa Climate Week alone covered over 200 events and engaged around 1,000 speakers. The discussions enabled us to highlight the real and potential solutions and innovations that can emerge from our continent. Looking at these numbers, I now understand. I was in a side event with a colleague, former minister from Panama, and he said he does not know what to take back home because I think there's a climate week coming up, and he says that we have set the bar so high. So he says he has bad news for his colleagues, but they have some time to work it out to try and catch up. So that is encouraging to know that we put up a good show. And we are not bragging. We are just saying we are very happy and encouraged that you heeded the call for Kenya to come and be part of this great success of bringing African voices together. Ladies and gentlemen, with less than 100 days to COP28, the outcome of our week-long interventions here have accorded us the opportunity and created regional momentum, forged alliances, and mobilized crucial resources that will enable us to achieve positive and significant results by the time we leave Dubai. All the accolades aside, we still have a lot of work ahead of us before COP28 in the UAE. We cannot afford to sit on our laurels. You all know that the conclusion of the first global stocktake, whose report has been released, calls on all of us to renew our ambition and accelerate concrete actions to save our planet and its people. The outcomes and pathway that we have been able to achieve out of the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week needs to be given effect if we are to realize the goals of the Paris Agreement of limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. I look forward to moving the resolutions and outcomes, as well as presenting these outcomes from the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week at COP28 in Dubai. I am convinced that we made history this week. Thank you all for turning up. Thank you for showing up and being part of this history. I am persuaded in my heart of hearts that this one-week spotlight of climate change action on Africa and Kenya, the conscience of the globe, must have been pricked somewhat, and that the world and globe's engagement on climate change cannot and will not be the same again moving forward. I am convinced that our themes, driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world, being for the Africa Climate Summit, and energy systems and industry, cities, urban and rural settlements, infrastructure and transport, land, ocean, food and water, being for the Africa Climate Week, will reverberate for years to come. Thank you for helping us and my ministry and the Africa Climate Summit Secretariat in writing of this climate change history. When Sweden hosted the Stockholm Conference in 1972 that brought forth the Stockholm Declaration, they might not have known that they would forever be entrenched, etched in history of human environment by parity of reasoning. I'm sure the Africa Climate Summit and Africa Climate Week, with its Nairobi Declaration, will be referred to many years to come. I will forever remain indebted to all of you colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. You have all definitely left an indelible mark on climate change action history. Thank you for letting me be part of it. You must all know that having gone through a week like this, all the highs and lows, concluding might be difficult. So maybe I just round it up and say, asanteni sana, God bless you all, na karibuni tena. One of the hardest things to do is African goodbyes, but I will end there saying asanteni tena sana. And just before I sit, I would just ask Joseph to stand up. Joseph